Hi everyone, I'm Danielle Perszyk and I'm a cognitive scientist at Amazon's experimental new AGI lab, and we're building Agentic AI there. So I'd like to start with a story about an experience that shaped how I understand agency. I spent a year of my undergrad at Exeter College and Oxford University, and Oxford is famous for its tutorial systems. It's a model where the professor or the tutor does very little other than give you an unreasonably long syllabus each week, send you off to go teach yourself, and then scaffold your self-teaching. And as a student, you're expected to go and get lost within the 39 libraries, and then return with an essay that demonstrates some brilliant new insight. So as I prepared for my tutorial each week, I often felt exhilarated by the possibility that I might have been the first to integrate some particular set of new ideas, to connect some dots in new ways. So I'd sit down across from my tutor, usually in a closet-sized office, and I would read my essay out loud. Then my tutor would Socratically lead me to realize that I, in fact, knew next to nothing. So each week, I would start over again, and back then I didn't have a smartphone, so I couldn't just reach into my pocket to access the world's information. I had to ride my bike, typically in the rain, to one of those 39 libraries, and after I finally located the information, I had to somehow integrate it into a novel thesis. And this was really hard. So each week, my tutor and I repeated this process. We worked together to iteratively remodel the world as I understood it. First, I would follow my curiosity, and this is about reducing friction because the goal was to motivate exploration. Oxford reduced friction by building a ton of libraries. Then I would write up my insights, which would allow my tutor and me to establish something called representational alignment. I'll say a lot more about this soon. This was about increasing friction because the goal was to force a coherent integration of ideas. Then I would start the process over again to reinforce my ability to continually learn. This was about cultivating a habit. So engaging in the tutorial system is essentially how I define having agency. Curiosity, alignment, and reinforcement are really about having a mechanism to learn and act, understanding the forces acting on you, and then doing this habitually, thinking rather than reacting. I remember feeling like the world was expanding faster than my ability to model it, and it was like my dad always used to tell me, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. The irony is that this whole iterative remodeling of the world only works because we are all constantly hallucinating. And that's because our brains don't have direct access to reality. They're stuck inside our heads where they can really only do a few things. They can make predictions based on their world models. They can take in sensory input, and then they can reconcile errors between the two. That's about it, and that's why neuroscientists call our brains prediction machines and say that perception is controlled hallucination. Now, obviously, the controlled part is the critical bit. There's no way I could be up here in front of you if I didn't have my hallucinations under control. But that's not all that's happening right now. If you're understanding my words, then I'm also influencing your hallucinations. And assuming that you do understand my words, then your brain just did something else. It activated all meanings of the word hallucination, including this one. So many of us have come to rely upon hallucinating chatbots for brainstorming, drafting content and code, and generating images of themselves. But the goalpost keeps moving. We're not satisfied because we want these agents to more closely resemble our own intelligence. And in fact, some engineers want to make AI that's even smarter than us. They want to know, how can we make AI smarter and give it more agency? Well, one thing that we know is that hallucinations are necessary for this because they allow us to go beyond the data. They're features, rather than bugs, of intelligence that's flexible like ours. We just need to figure out how to control those hallucinations, and to do that, we can look at how humans do it. I'm going to return to how humans control our hallucinations, but as a hint, the educational system is critical to that. But I think that this is the wrong question. I think instead we should be asking, how can we build AI that makes us smarter and gives us more agency? We don't want this. We want this. Artificial intelligence should complement human intelligence. We want agents plus humans to be greater than the sum of our parts. So this focus on making the AI more advanced actually reflects a category error about what intelligence is. And that error is that general intelligence can exist within a thinking machine. You all know the story by now, which is why you probably spotted the hallucination here. The concepts of machines that can think like humans didn't originate in the 2010s. It originated in 1956 when a group of engineers and mathematicians set out to build thinking machines so they could solve intelligence. Now, of course, these guys didn't end up solving intelligence. I'm not quite sure what that means. But what they did do was found the field of AI and spark a feedback loop that changed how we live and work. So first, we built more powerful computers. Then we connected them together to build the internet, which enabled even more powerful learning mechanisms. And that made the computers even more powerful. And today, now that we've compressed the internet, we're back to aiming for thinking machines that know all of the things and have agency, too. Well, luckily, this wasn't the only historical perspective. I bet a lot of you know who this is, but if you don't, this is Douglas Engelbart. He invented the computer mouse and the GUI, and he didn't care so much about thinking machines and solving intelligence. What he cared about was thinking humans and augmenting our intelligence. He proposed that computers could make us smarter, and of course, he was absolutely right. So as computers became more pervasive, they also started changing our brains. We began offloading our computation to devices and distributing our cognition across the digital environment. This had the effect of augmenting our intelligence. Scientists call this techno-social coevolution. It just means that we invent new technologies that then shape us. So here we have two historical perspectives for the goal of building more advanced intelligence that resembles our own. The first is to build AI that's as smart as or even smarter than us. And the second is to build AI that makes us smarter. Now, we all believe that more general purpose agents are going to be more useful, but how? Well, things are useful when they have one of two effects. They can simplify our lives by allowing us to offload things, or they can give us more leverage. The thing is, these two processes are interwoven. Automation is an engine for augmentation. This is how we become expert at things. We start by paying conscious attention to the details, we practice, and then our brains move things over to our subconscious. Automation frees up our attention to focus on other things. But of course, the problem is that automation doesn't always lead to augmentation. Sometimes it even comes at a cost. How many hours have we lost to scrolling? How many echo chambers have we been trapped within? How many times has autocomplete completely shut down our thinking? So this is how algorithms can reduce our agency, and it's why increasingly intelligent agents might actually cause more problems than they solve. But if we have more granular control to actively tailor these systems the way that we want, then they can actually increase our agency. And this is the crossroads that is ahead of us. The path we want to take is obvious. What's less obvious is how we navigate that. But if we return to our framework for agency, reducing and increasing friction in the right places, then it becomes a lot clearer. So automation is about reducing friction, while augmentation is about increasing friction. Reducing friction involves building infrastructure for thinking and acting, literally connecting brain areas, while increasing friction is about encouraging better thinking and acting, so strengthening those useful connections. Let's call it cognitive friction. So we've seen that these two are linked. Your curiosity drives you to connect more dots, and that leads you to build this subconscious infrastructure. These are the neural networks that support your expertise. And as you build your expertise, you are more able to consciously integrate your insights with new ideas. So you can also think about these processes as system 1, or thinking fast, and system 2, or thinking slow. The relationship between the infrastructure and the friction isn't just true about the brain, it also captures this automation and augmentation flywheels that we've already seen, so the relationship holds at the level of society. On the infrastructure side, a long time ago, institutions like Oxford built a ton of libraries. Today, we can access that information instantly with the internet, and now AI, as we've just seen, is making the retrieval of that a lot more intuitive. So our next challenge is to build AI agents that actually do things for us, that give us new mechanisms for learning and acting. On the cognitive friction side, we've developed these educational systems to leverage these technologies to iteratively remodel the world with methods like science. So if we want to make sure that we increase our collective agency, we really need to get the dynamics here right. And that's why we need to coordinate our efforts and bring together tech and universities. So Amazon is building these AI agents that will serve as what I call our collective subconscious. They will enable us to tap into each other's expertise so that we can collaborate better. But in the era of agents, we need to be especially thoughtful that they give us more agency rather than take it away. So we need to build something like collective agency. So to return to our question, how can we build AI that makes us smarter and gives us more agency? We need a partnership between tech and universities. But what exactly is each side responsible for? How does tech build these agents that are aligned with our intelligence? And how do universities make sure that the agentic technologies increase our agency? Well, we need to better understand how intelligence actually works. It turns out that over the past decades, as engineers were building more advanced intelligence, scientists were learning about how it works. And what they learned is that this still isn't the whole story. Our coevolution with computers is just the most recent chapter in a much longer story that's still being written. And actually, Engelbart hinted at this too. He wrote, "In a very real sense, as represented by the steady evolution of our augmentation means, the development of artificial intelligence has been going on for centuries." Well, it's actually been going on for a lot longer than that, so let me take you back to the beginning. Around 6 million years ago, the environment changed for our ancestors, and they had exactly two options. They could solve intelligence or go extinct. And the ones that did solve intelligence did so through a feedback loop that changed our social cognition. So by now, this is familiar. First, our brains got bigger, then we started connecting them, which allowed us to further fine-tune into social information, and this made our brains even bigger. But now you all know that this is only half the story. The other half had to do with how we all got smarter. So we offloaded our computation to other minds and distributed our cognition across the social environment. And this had the effect of augmenting our intelligence. Scientists call the thing that we got better at through these flywheels representational alignment. We figured out how to reproduce the contents of our minds to better cooperate. But of course, we don't do this perfectly. If we did, then we'd just be one giant hive mind. We all represent information slightly differently because we all have unique experiences and biases. And when we try to align our minds, there's friction. This friction is what generates the novel combinations of ideas and allows us to ratchet up our intelligence through cultural evolution. So in other words, the friction of our interactions is the engine for innovation. Consider this. We used to think that our modern human cognition emerged around 30,000 years ago when we started seeing a lot of cave art and complex tools in the archaeological record. We called it the cognitive revolution, not to be confused with this transition from behaviorism to cognitive science in the mid-20th century. But now archaeologists think that our ancestors were cognitively modern as early as 300,000 years ago. The interesting part is that this evidence for symbolic thinking and complex tool use appeared, disappeared, and then reappeared as a function of population density and different groups coming together. So this shows that our sophisticated thinking is latent until we interact with others. The key insight is that the history of augmenting our intelligence didn't start with computers. It started with an evolutionary adaptation that allowed us to use each other's minds as tools. This means that this is general intelligence. This can also be general intelligence. This could possibly be general intelligence, but there's no reason to expect that it will be aligned. And this is not general intelligence. So here we can fix our category error. Intelligence of the variety that humans have can't exist in a vacuum. It doesn't exist in individual humans. It won't exist in individual models. Instead, general intelligence emerges through our interactions. It's social, distributed, and ever-evolving. And this means that we need to measure and optimize for our interactions with agents. We can't just measure model capabilities and things like time spent on platform. We also have to measure human capabilities, things like creativity, productivity, strategic thinking, insight, those aha moments, undistracted states of flow. So agents, to be able to do this, will really need models of our mind. And if we build agents to optimize for understanding our minds, just like we do with all of each other, then we'll get alignment. And if they also understand what we know and what we don't know, along with what we care about, then they can bring out our intrinsic curiosity. So they can meet us where we are, they can give us these personalized analogies so that we can learn anything we want. Now, one of the biggest opportunities that I see for agents that have models of our minds is that they'll be able to learn knowledge and skills from all of us and then redistribute that information to all of us. This is what we're building at the AGI lab. We're building a universal teammate that continually learns with all of us. So whether you're a student or a knowledge worker, your AI teammate will do your repetitive, mundane tasks so you have more time to pursue your curiosities. They'll learn about your work and your goals, which will enable them to help you learn and collaborate. So to answer our question, how does tech build AI agents that are aligned with our intelligence? Agents need models of our mind. And this research program is really unique to our lab at Amazon. Now, even without models of minds, chatbots are already starting to help some students to more effectively, efficiently learn. These students are proactively asking the right questions to get the most out of the chatbot so that they can better learn, but other students are struggling. They're using chatbots without actually learning. They're getting the answers, but they're not encoding the information. And of course, we need to fix this. We need to make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of social media or worse. So once again, an understanding of human intelligence can help here. Let's take a closer look at that original adaptation that allowed us to use each other's minds as tools. It's probably obvious that it was language. So language co-evolved with our models of each other's minds, and yet another flywheel that integrated our systems for communication and representation. Language and models of minds were so immensely useful that they triggered a whole new series of flywheels that scientists call cognitive technologies. Each one is a foundation for the next, and each one allows us to think more abstract thoughts. So collectively, these tools for thoughts stabilize our thinking, they reorganize our brains, and they control our hallucinations. They do this by directing our attention to the same things in our shared environment so we can build these world models together. And as we've seen, this representational alignment comes with friction. We're forced to consider each other's perspectives and then integrate that information. But what happens when there's not enough friction? When there's too little friction, you see uncontrolled hallucinations. So let's look at a few examples from history. When the printing press first reduced friction for mass-producing books, you know what really took off? The witch trials. So gossip that was once localized exploded into this mass hysteria. Similarly, we all know what happened when social media took over the internet. It wasn't just echo chambers and doom scrolling, but it was also conspiracy theories. And now chatbot sycophancy is reducing friction by turning these passing thoughts into persistent delusions, and we call this AI psychosis. So what's the fix? Well, we can think about the printing press again. The thing that helped cure people of their delusions wasn't just more reading and writing, but better education, critical thinking. Only then did literacy actually augment people's intelligence. You need both the tools and the methods. The tools reduce the friction, and then the methods of using them increase the friction. So giving kids calculators is not going to teach them math, but if they already know a little bit of math, then the calculators will certainly allow them to learn more advanced math more efficiently. And giving people internet access doesn't allow them to do their own research effectively, but trained scientists with the internet can do research a lot more effectively. So that's why we can't just teach students how to use AI tools. Of course, they do need to know how to use these tools that can help remove the friction for them learning and exploring. But we also need to teach them new critical thinking skills. So students need to know how to ask the right questions, how to check sources, critique sources, and integrate ideas at higher levels of abstraction. So students and agents can divide up this labor, but students really need to understand how the whole process works. In an era of AI teammates, the learning artifact that students produce, the thing that forces them to have this cognitive friction, it might not look like an essay back when I was at Oxford doing these tutorials. It might look a lot more multimodal, interactive, and iterative. It'll be this living artifact that other students can contribute to. So that will introduce friction as more people are contributing to these living artifacts, and agents can help with that alignment. So they can focus our attention by reducing distractions and taking care of all of the digital drudgery. They can generate these images and UIs and prototypes on the fly to help us test ideas and build interactive experiences that reflect new knowledges. I imagine this open source discovery hub where students, professors, and agents are working together to iteratively remodel our collective understanding of the world. So if the whole student body is collaborating with the agentic teammates, then agents can also learn patterns about how we learn. They can pair students with similar learning styles or similar interests in real life, and this social learning is a really powerful mechanism for reinforcing the learning process. So this should look familiar. This is the tutorial process, but updated for the era of agentic teammates. Note that this isn't just about AI tutors. We hear a lot about AI tutors, but that's just one part of the holistic solution. We've got this multi-agent system of universal teammates working alongside students and scientists to learn, produce new knowledge, and cultivate agency. So notice, too, that the lines between learning and teaching become blurred. Agents that have models of our minds can help bring out everybody's intrinsic curiosity, so we all become lifelong learners. And as we learn, we can work with agents to produce these useful artifacts for other learners. So this will give students the power to learn anything that they want, to give them true agency. To return to our question, how do universities make sure that AI agents increase our agency? Universities can help make sure that we have this agentic tutorial system where every student has a team of agents that helps them learn and collaborate and contribute their unique skills to the broader community. Thank you for listening. I would like to now invite my colleague, Colleen Schwab, to dive into some of these topics a little bit more deeply.